with this USAID hysteria going on, the Trump administration folding it, closing it. There's still a lot of debate around it, but it seems like it's getting folded into the State Department under Marco Rubio. Many have criticized its regime change operations and how it was functioning. Something about this says something bigger about the US empire, and I'm curious on whether you could give a kind of overall picture of where these regime change operations, where USAID's role has fit in the context of this changing world.
First, Danny, let me tell you the truth about USAID. And this truth comes from being in the room repeatedly for 3 years as chief of staff of the State Department. Andrew Natsios, Boston born and bred, was the director of USAID at that time. And we commiserated with him and others, including Colin Powell, about the demise of USAID. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that Jesse Helms and others in the Congress, who had already destroyed virtually ACDA, the independent arms control agency, and USIA, the Independent Information Agency, which had been, at least its predecessor, responsible for the most effective machine we'd ever put together in that regard, the Voice of America during the Cold War. All of these things were destroyed by Republican congressmen and others who really don't like foreign policy and really don't, and I say don't in the present tense. Jesse's dead because plenty of them linger, from Tommy Tuberville to Tom Cotton. What aid is and was for us, disappointingly so, and has continued to be, is a few people of the traditional aid character belonging to USAID and by extension to the US Department of State, managing hundreds, if not thousands, of contractors, private contractors. Oh yes, we privatized everything in the US government under Dick Cheney, and we privatized development. And what that meant was a couple of things that were really disastrous to the original USAID mission. One was that all these contractors competed with one another, as is normal in a capitalist system, for the contracts. And so there was no sharing of best practices. There was no cross-border, if you will, or cross-county or precinct. Afghanistan comes to mind immediately. No one would share anything that they learned in one province for the other province, because that gave your contractor competitor a knee up. It gave him your information. So USAID became basically dysfunctional. It couldn't even do anything really comprehensive because it had all these contractors. Now, where do these contractors basically come from? Well, occasionally there's one or two hired in country, but most of them come from the United States. Now, you know the United States Congress's reason for doing this primarily. All this money flowed back into the United States, but development suffered as a result of this change, because it was a fractious, disconcerted, uncoordinated effort in the field, and the managers who were professionals at it, and usually foreign service officers or the like, civil service or what have you, who knew what they were doing, were totally frustrated. At one point, Colin Powell actually thought about getting rid of the whole apparatus, which is what we're doing now, maybe. But it was a reason to do it because it was dysfunctional in such an enormous sense. All it did was make money for contractors, most of whom were based in the US. Now, do they know that? Does Elon Musk know that? Does anybody else in the Trump administration know anything about what they're doing? Probably not, because what they're doing is just doing it for political purposes. So I have no idea how to comment on what it means to Marco Rubio. Now, Marco Rubio may understand what I've just said, at least intuitively, if not comprehensively, and wants to maintain something of the old USAID, for example. Maybe even had plans to revitalize it in that regard. He'd need the Congress to help him, of course, to do that. But in any event, this is a tempest in a teapot in every respect in terms of the effectiveness of the U.S. International Development Program. And don't get Samantha Power to tell you about that, or anybody else who's been involved in it, and probably Condi Rice, Powell's successor as Secretary of State, because they want to maintain it. They want to keep that. They want that money to flow wherever it flows. It's kind of like the contractors in Ukraine. The money doesn't flow to Ukraine. The money flows to Lockheed and back to the United States, the arms money at least. So that's the first point I'd make. And then the second point I'd make is the same one that I think Steve Walt made yesterday. I haven't seen the article yet, but I've been told about it. Donald Trump may have peaked in his power, presidentially speaking, this early in his administration, particularly with these tariff deals. I'm going to put tariffs on Canada. I'm going to put tariffs on Mexico. Oh, no, now they're going to do what I want them to do, so I'm not going to do it. A lot of what he's doing right now is just that. It's to scare people. It's to make dramatic notes in the market, as it were. It's to maybe sometimes fulfill campaign promises, but he has absolutely no idea how to make any of what he's promised work. And the big problem right now is Ukraine, because he has no idea how to make that war stop. None whatsoever. If he did, the very first visit he'd make would be to Moscow without Zelensky anywhere around. He would ignore Zelensky as he flew over him, go to Moscow, sit down with Putin and talk. And between the two of them, they could probably come up with subsequent talks with experts, not people like Trump is appointing to his team, but real experts. Putin would have no problem doing that. And they could get this thing ended in a month or two, probably. And it'd be ended on the basis of what Donald Trump himself has said in the Newsweek article, at least, which I assume was a leak, are the main parameters of a deal. And it'd be over. And Putin would not be interested in any other attack on any other NATO country. I guarantee you that. And we would be at least without one of the empire's efforts to stymie this change in power in Europe. And maybe even Europe could dig itself out from it. We're getting ready in Germany, I'm told by experts over there. We're getting ready to probably put in the lead position in the German coalition that forms after the 23 February elections, a former CEO of BlackRock, who will then be the Chancellor of Germany. Marriage. This is incredible. Germany is going to put probably the German economy's major enemy in as the new chancellor. This is crazy, but this is what we've caused to happen. And this is what the Europeans are doing in response to what we've caused to happen. That's a long-winded answer, but we're really in trouble, and Trump has no clue how to fix that trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is with USAID, I mean, there's been so many revelations made about them in the past that money to the white helmets in Syria, for example, ends up in Al-Qaeda's hands. Money to Venezuela ends up in Juan Guaido's hands as this kind of unelected, unknown puppet attempting regime change. It sounds like a lot of money, in retrospect, tiny compared to the entire budget of, let's say, the U.S. military, but a good chunk of money was going around into private hands and into regime change operations. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look at Moldova. Not Moldova right now, but Moldova is a target. Look at Georgia and the Dream Party, and look at most vividly, look at Romania and Colin Georgescu, who won the initial poll count, if you will, to get into the elections and possibly be the new leader of Romania. And immediately when that happened, we sent every NGO on the face of the earth, every CIA operative that wasn't busy elsewhere, and they're busy all over the globe, I guarantee you, to get that situation reversed, to make sure that Colin isn't elected the leader of Romania, because he's promised to take Romania out of NATO, be another Viktor Orban in NATO, another burr in NATO's shoulder. We're doing the same thing with the Dream Party, Georgia's Dream Party in Tbilisi, because they want to maintain a balance between Moscow and Washington and NATO, a balance. They don't want to be seen as being too favorable to either side. They just want to survive in a neutral position where they can survive peacefully. And we're over there trying to unseat them. What did we do with the previous president, who was our president? Salome Zarakashvili, we took her to the McCain Institute in Arizona so she can lead an NGO effort to go back to Georgia and unseat the current government, duly elected. This is the empire.
With USAID and this broader soft power apparatus that the United States possesses, it seems like over the years, their attention, just like our attention, of course, has been on the rise of Russia and China in this new world that you've been talking about. Do you feel like this Trump administration reabsorbing or getting rid of USAID is going to affect this overall confrontation we are seeing by the empire, or will it simply be rebranded or reconstituted in a different form?
The latter. But I don't think it would have been any formidable part of the empire's attempt to stave off this inexorable and inevitable shift of power from the west to the east. It might have had a cursory job on the periphery doing some things, but basically nothing is going to stop this shift. Nothing whatsoever. The best efforts of the American empire, both economically, financially, militarily, security-wise in general, any element of power you want to talk about, it's not going to work because this is going to happen. The question that needs to be asked by Donald Trump, I mean, he's supposed to be an iconoclast. He's supposed to be different. He's supposed to be dynamic. He's supposed to be transactional. This is ultimate transactionalism. What needs to be done is an accommodation with those powers in the East who are inevitably going to be the not hegemons, because they do not want to be hegemons. That's the beauty of this. But to be some sort of condominium that exists in peace and not in war, and whose main purpose is making money for its people, and not necessarily in the now $7 to $8 trillion, yes, I said trillion, dollar black economy in the world. That is the economy that is foul and crooked, and whose main purpose is to traffic in people, especially women and little boys and girls, and to sell illicit drugs and to do other things of that nature, and for whom the U.S. banking system and Doha and Tel Aviv and the banks there are the main money launderers. That's the kind of condominium we need in the world. And the kind of attitude that the ASEAN community, for example, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, brings to facing these challenges is the right way. Comity, collaboration, and cooperation. And China, so far, has seemed to be willing to go that route. And it has the main power and the main principle in all this happening right now in this inexorable shift of power. It's the magnet, it's the center of this shift. So if other people want to operate this way, and that's why BRICS is such an attraction to the global south and elsewhere. It has a major attraction because it offers this kind of approach to power in the world, as opposed to the approach we offer, which is bombs, bullets, bayonets, and sanctions, period. We know nothing else. If we don't shift that, if we don't join this inexorable shift and try to help guide and make it work better for our side, if you will, we're going to lose out completely. And it's not going to take that long. It's going to happen in a generation or two. And that sounds like a long time, but mind you, it isn't. I've lived 80 years now. It's not a long time.
You've written much about the U.S. empire, about its collapsing military capabilities. USAID has fit largely into this picture, and it has also played a large role in Ukraine. What have you made of this move by the Trump administration and how it impacts the overall geopolitical situation?
Well, I mean, it was a front. It always was a front. It's not a secret. It's front for the operations of influence. It's basically a conduit for money, which are being poured into all kinds of the regime change operations. So, I mean, yeah, it's good that he shuts down this thing. What's her name? The new girl from the White House. I even posted her video yesterday. She was talking to the press secretary. She was talking about, financing the transgender opera in Colombia and things of this nature, or DEI programs in the Serbian workplaces and things like that. This is complete insanity. So yeah, if Trump cuts it down, I mean, it's not going to change anything in terms of the relations between superpowers, but at least it might actually relieve some pressure on, smaller and weaker countries where United States, thinks that it is at home and wants to behave itself as the owner of those countries. And USAID was this, one of the instruments of the basically American imperialism. It's good, as yesterday I wrote, it's very good that Trump dropped all this pretense. Finally, we do not have to go out and, listen to this nauseating, pardon my French, BS about human rights, democracy, and things like that. This is American imperialism, and it's changing its, so to speak, modus operandi a little bit, because obviously the United States is extremely stretched in terms of resources. And one of the on the cutting block was this organization.
As this USAID situation is happening, there's also the continuation of military assistance to Ukraine happening at the same time. I'm curious, did military assistance really ever end to Ukraine? And talk about, if you could, how USAID has been involved in Ukraine, because not many people know that USAID was also involved there as a soft power institution.
No, I mean, USAID was doing in Ukraine the same as it does everywhere, promoting all kinds of the insane ideas, which in the end should work for promoting the United States interest. Simple as that. There's nothing really new there. And again, USAID or USAID is just one track on which the subversion of Ukraine and changing of the regime, which is coup d'etat in 2014, was happening. So much of it was also going through the direct State Department, such as Victoria Nuland, or insane late John McCain and his so-called Institute for Democracy, which are all fronts and grant eaters for all kinds of the nefarious operations. So it's again, as I already stated, there's nothing really secret about it. It's in the open, and yeah, Ukrainians embrace that because they loved it at that time. They don't love it anymore. So, and as per military assistance, yeah, there was a kind of pause, but again, it resumed, and yeah, so it changes absolutely nothing, because United States has literally zero what it can provide Ukraine in terms of the quantity and quality, very low quality of the American weapons, which can change or alter in any way the outcome of what is happening right now in special military operations. So yeah, it's pretty much a lot of noise around it, definitely. But other than that, business as usual.
Yeah, there has been a lot of noise, Andrei, and particularly there's been a lot of noise about Ukraine as of late by Donald Trump. A move like this with regard to USAID is being seen by many as a huge step on the toes of the American empire and its regime change operations. Yet Donald Trump has continued military assistance to Ukraine, which started as a regime change operation, which USAID supported. So how do we square these circles, Andrei? What have you made of this period of Donald Trump's beginning weeks as president of the United States?
Well, Donald Trump talks a lot. Okay, he always did. Most behind his talk is empty words, which, for example, Russians coming out and constantly debunk his statements like, oh, we have successful negotiation. Which negotiations? Actually, as it turned out, then, of course, everybody begins to read this content of what he's talking about. They merely discussing possibility of scheduling some kind of meeting. So probably on the level of the working group, probably the Keith Kellogg will go out. He will parade themselves there as basically a joke. Russians will laugh at him, and that will be it, I think. And again, even that is not in plans. When you have the spokesperson for Kremlin, Mr. Peskov, and First Deputy Foreign Minister, Mr. Ryabkov, speaking that nobody contacted us or anything, yet somehow the negotiations are successful. Well, I guess this is what Keith Kellogg and Trump administration does. They are staying in contact with Ukrainian side. and they will continue to stay with them. Russians are not interested, and as already so many times have been stated that, yeah, Russia is ready for the negotiated solution as long as, you know, those points or items have been, you know, satisfied. And we all know about what Russians are talking about. So yeah, it's all PR. It is all, you know, verbiage to cover up that now we have 2 weeks of Trump official basically staying as in their old office as the president of the United States. And as I suspected, and I was saying this for the last year nonstop, because already by the mid of the year, it was clear that he's going to win the election, that he will have about 2-3 weeks max before this war in Ukraine becomes his war, and his presidency will be ruined together with the remnants of American self-respect, and, you know, and the humiliation will continue. So evidently he's hell-bent now to, you know, make this war his war, despite the fact there's all this lofty rhetoric. Remember, 24 hours, now it's 100 days, then it will be 100 years. So, and yeah, it's just all political theater. It's all for political show, but reality substance is not there. He literally has nothing to offer Russia. It's because Russians don't care about sanctions. They don't care about anything. They care about actually moving NATO out of the way. And they want to discuss with Trump, not Ukraine. Ukraine is not America's business to start with. The United States have been thoroughly defeated and humiliated in Ukraine. And in Europe, it is about the overall security structure, so to speak, in Europe. And if the United States is not ready to give what Russians demand, then yeah, there will be no any kind of substantive, you know, negotiations, albeit, you know, Russians are really good. Fact is, Russian diplomacy is the best diplomacy in the world in terms of pulling the cojones of the cat, you know. And so Russians will be involved in those negotiations for years or whatever, you know. But meanwhile, the dynamics on the battlefield is very clear. Only people like Petraeus and Ben Hodges and people, you know, those not very smart American generals, they believe that any kind of outcome could be altered. It cannot. It's set in stone, and we know what is happening. So, and that's what is this all about. It is all about, you know, showing the picture of, you know, the still mighty United States trying to control the narrative. But that's what the United States primarily does in the last 20 years, narratives, you know, so that's what it is.
Yeah, and the USAID was big on promoting narratives, particularly promoting the idea that the United States' foreign activities, its interventions, were promoting democracy. And so I'm wondering if you could give us a sense of how we came to this moment, in your opinion, Andrei, with regard to, on the one hand, Donald Trump, he is saying that he wants to end the conflict in Ukraine, but offering nothing. And on the other hand, he is using his first weeks of his administration, ostensibly targeting a particular organization which is about promoting, quote unquote, democracy and conducting regime change. It seems like there's a contradiction in terms here, Andrei, and I'm curious about how do you see the Trump administration's moves here in the context of promoting so-called democracy?
Well, there's no promotion of democracy. Trump, as I already stated, he came out swinging, and he's talking about American imperialism. Nobody buys this BS about democracy, human rights, and things of this nature. This is for the naive people and people who cannot think rationally, really, which is in some cases, sadly, you know, affects a whole nation, like it happened in Ukraine. But the point is that he merely changes a little bit modus operandi. It is those, you know what, small tactical steps to adjust already depleted resources of the United States. And USAID, yeah, after you see the dynamics in the world and what is happening, so yeah, it's proved to be not very effective, especially after the utter failure in Georgia, for example. which even being infected and infested with all those NGOs, managed to still, get the handle on the whole situation internally. And now Georgia is essentially out of the Western fold. To a degree, same goes for Hungary, Slovakia. So yeah, it's not very effective. There is a certain, strata of the popular, societies everywhere around the world, which is called liberal schizophrenia, if you wish. So, but majority of people really live by their, everyday affairs, bread and butter issues. So they don't care about transgender operas in Colombia or DEI promotion on the workplace in Serbia. They care about what they have on the table today and how much, well, more or less their rights are protected per whatever the constitutions and stability. Ask anybody who didn't completely lose his or her marbles what matters in their life. They will tell you stability, which is the most important part in human life. So, and he merely just that. So it's tactical things. It's has very little strategic impact. It just, as I already stated, adjustment, because United States really doesn't have money. It can print money, but the more you print them, the less you have them. That's what many people do not understand. And he tries to, well, basically concentrate on, going back to Monroe Doctrine, Western Hemisphere, and this is where he sees United States, exercising full imperial power, including, of course, in Latin America, no doubt about it, Central America, and then, of course, we have the issue of Canada, we have the issue of Greenland, and per Europe is, as Vladimir Putin correctly stated, they will fall in line and will begin to wag their tails, because Europe is not the subject of the international relations, it is an object. And it will be played by the United States to, in the American mind, the advantage of the United States. And it's being played already so. But yeah, it's deindustrializing with an incredible speed, especially when you look at Germany, for example. And so that's the Trump's imperialism, which it always was. It's just that he doesn't like to anymore pretend anything. And I think so it's a very healthy process in this respect. Here's the guy comes out and said, I'm imperialist, I want to do this, and there you go. Take it or leave it. And I think so it's a very positive development, because nobody now has to sit down in some corrupt organization like United Nations and listen to this BS about democracy, human rights, and all kinds of things of this nature. So simple as that.